He walked in, saw me in his bed, and the room cracked in half. 1 second of quiet, then the slap I still hear in the walls. Tell me something. If it were you, would you have stayed to explain, or would you have walked out like I did? My name is Maya Williams, and I didn't set out to rescue anybody. I took a job most people turned down twice, then warned me to run live-in care for twin boys who hadn't slept through the night since their mother died. 14 nannies had quit. 14. That's not a job listing, that's a hazard sign. But I've lived through things you don't put on a resume: foster homes that smelled like bleach and disappointment, a son I lost to illness and still talk to when I fold towels, a childhood where staying was a miracle you didn't dare expect. So when an agency whispered about 2 small boys in a white house with a black tie kind of silence, I said yes, not because I thought I could fix them, but because I recognized the sound of a home that couldn't breathe. Their father was Edward Hawthorne, the kind of man whose name sits on buildings, not mailboxes. Tall, pressed, expensive in all the quiet ways, the watch, the shoes, the way people cleared space a step before he arrived. People said he was grieving, people said he was controlling, people whispered those like they were opposites. The twins, Ethan and Eli, moved together like birds who had learned to fly by clinging wing to wing. Ethan had stress nosebleeds, the kind that make a kid look like he fell out of a comic book, and he tried to act like it was nothing. Eli kept his thumb close and his eyes closer. People think grief is loud. Sometimes grief is the kind of quiet that makes your skin itch. Mrs. Keller ran the house, guardian of the lemon cookies and the truth. She met me at the door with a tired smile and a towel pressed into my hand like a relay baton. They don't trust words, she said, so try presence. I knew exactly what she meant. When you grow up wanting someone to stay, you learn that presence is a language of its own. The first nights were triage. The nightmares hit at 1:07 a.m., like trains that forgot their schedule changed. Ethan's tell was the quick swallow he tried to hide. Eli's was the way he looked at the corner of the ceiling, like monsters prefer crown molding. I started a ritual because rituals build ladders, warm washcloths, a cup of water. The curtains cracked just enough to promise morning, a made-up lullaby stitched from the memory of one my mother sang in the rare, gentle weeks. If you know, you know. You take the broken song and you sing it anyway. By day, we built tiny structures that looked like play to anyone else. A feelings chart with marker faces. A shoebox, mailbox for secrets, the kind you can slide in with a crayon drawing when you don't have words yet. House rules taped to the fridge in crayon: always knock, no yelling. Near bedtime hugs have to be asked for pancakes on Sunday. You'd be surprised how much peace a 5-year-old can recover when a rule has their handwriting in it. 5 days in the storm finally rolled off the coast. The boys begged to try the big room, the master bedroom where their mother used to read through thunder. I hesitated. Boundaries optics, the checklist that lives in the back pocket of anyone who's ever been called the help. But Ethan went pale and wobbly, the nosebleed hit, and shock doesn't take appointments. I settled them on the big bed, one on each side, tissues, damp cloth, the lullaby with no proper melody. Their breathing deepened that heavy child sleep that means a body has finally believed the ground won't move. It felt like watching a sea flatten after months of whitecaps. Then the door opened. "What the hell do you think you're doing in my bed?" His voice wasn't loud, it was sharpened. I sat up with my hands open. "They were scared," I said quietly. Eli started crying. Ethan had a bleed. I didn't finish. The sound of palm on skin in a room that had just learned to trust silence. I can still feel it. "You're fired," he said, clipped, practiced. "Get out of my house." I didn't argue. I leaned down, kissed each boy on the head because goodbyes matter. Even when they're small, picked up my shoes and walked downstairs past Mrs. Keller's face folding in on itself and out into the drizzle. Yeah, that happened. Pattern interrupt. Here's the part nobody saw. The house didn't explode when I left. It fell still. The twins slept on, not drugged by exhaustion, not knocked down by crying, just asleep. And that difference matters. Edward stood by the bed and felt the quiet he used to mistake for control, and he noticed what I'd noticed. He found the note I left on the nightstand, the only thing I had time to write on the back of a folded napkin. If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will. Have you ever felt shame throb in the same hand that did the hurting he did? Some lessons need a sting to stick. I didn't cry on the marble stairs. I didn't cry at the gate. I cried at a bus stop with a vending machine, coffee and a stranger's tissue. Not because of the slap I've lived through worse, because of the unfinished work. When you've been the kid, no one stayed for leaving a child who finally slept, pulls a thread that goes all the way back. I counted taillights, promised myself out loud I would keep being the kind of person I could look in the eye. And the next day, I went to the shelter and taught the writing class I'd told them I'd teach. Your voice has value even when it shakes, I wrote on the whiteboard, and the girls with their hard eyes and soft hands watched me like they were deciding if promises could still be real. That's where he found me. Polished soles on scuffed linoleum suit that didn't belong in a building with flickering exit signs, apology in his posture before he said it. I felt my spine find steel. I was wrong, he said. No, long preamble. No PR apology. I saw you in my space. I let fear speak louder than truth, and I put my hands on you. That is something I will regret for the rest of my life. He asked me to come back. I didn't say yes. I set terms. No cameras in the children's rooms. Safety is not surveillance. Family dinners at the table with you. No phones, no business, just humans eating at the same time. We rewrite the house rules with the twins in the room, because agency is medicine. And if you ever raise your hand again, at me or anyone who doesn't deserve it, I'm gone and I'm not coming back. He didn't argue. He nodded like a man who finally understood a line drawn in chalk is still a line if you choose to honor it. I returned at dawn, the iron gates opening like they were letting light in. The butler blinked as if I were a holiday. The boys thundered down the stairs. Eli became all arms and curls in my neck. Ethan held up a sketch that said, "You stayed even when you left, and if you think that didn't break me in the best way, it did." We taped the new rules on the fridge with 2 smiling sun magnets. Always knock. No yelling near bedtime. Hugs must be asked for. Pancakes on Sundays. 1 story each before lights out. Listen first. Apologize when you're wrong. No cameras, no exceptions. And Edward added a neat line at the bottom, make space for forgiveness, even when it's hard. Something in the house loosened like a belt after Sunday dinner. We found our new rhythm. Breakfast became a chorus of sticky hands and bad knock-knock jokes. Bath time had a playlist. Bedtime turned into the worst and best storytelling you've ever heard from a man who mispronounces hippopotamus but knows when to pause for laughter. Presence over perfection. That's the whole thing, you know what I mean. Then the wave rose. One morning the email subject line said, "Notice of motion," which is lawyer for storm. The grandparents, the Hollingsworths, pearls, and pointed sentences filed for temporary guardianship. They used all the fancy words that mean unfit father, unqualified nanny, and they reached for that slap like it was their ace card. Twist. The thing I thought would end me that night became the weapon pointed at 2 boys who finally slept. I volunteered to testify. Not because I craved a spotlight, But because the twins didn't need heroes, they needed adults who wouldn't flinch. Walking into a courthouse with your past folded in your pocket makes your bones feel loud. Mrs. Hollingsworth went first voice like glassware. What kind of example is a man who hires an uncredentialed stranger and then admits to striking her? She threw unqualified like a knife. Judge Templeton looked at me and asked if I wished to respond. I didn't bring notes. I brought what I had nights at 1-7. Washcloths, the lullaby with no sheet music, two little boys who learn to ask for hugs and sleep through thunder. I said I don't have a PhD. What I have is consistency. What I have is the refrigerator where we wrote our rules together. What I have is the truth that I stayed when 14 others left, not because I'm special, but because someone needed to. I said the man who slapped me apologized, changed, and showed up for his kids. And if we punish change when it finally happens, what exactly are we teaching about accountability? Then I let the silence do its job. The judge ruled. Petition denied. It didn't fix everything, but it fixed that. Edward squeezed my hand under the table, a small language we'd learned, thank you, and I'm learning in the same press. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Most stories cut to credits after court. Ours didn't. Standing on those courthouse steps, Edward said he didn't want to promote me, he wanted to give me a voice. He meant a seat at the actual table, not the kids' one in the corner. We decided to build a place for children like Ethan and Eli, not a clinic, not a headline, a sanctuary where safety could be practiced like scales on a piano. We called it the Hawthorne Williams Center for Healing. If the hyphen makes you roll your eyes, same. Until I saw the papers that gave me legal standing to protect the twins if anything happened to him. Paper hits different when it finally recognizes the family you already built. We started in the sunroom with mismatched chairs and coffee that tasted like effort more than quality. Dr. Angela Monroe, retired child therapist, said yes. Joseph from a foster program said he'd send the kids who fall through the cracks. And then Belle arrived, 16, cobalt hair astare like a door with 4 locks. She didn't want therapy. She wanted the proof that we'd be there next Tuesday. I didn't coax. I sat beside her and drew badly while she sketched birds tied up in ropes. And when she snorted laughing during a card game with the twins, I looked away so she could keep the win. The center hummed into life, pasta, overcooked paint on the floor, rules scotch-taped to pillars. And because every new garden draws a rabbit, a local blog ran a smear about improper staffing. Then an anonymous complaint surfaced. A forged document slipped into Belle's file, wrong signature, wrong social worker. A trap meant to say we were careless with the one who could least afford it. It wasn't the grandparents. It was someone who prefers shadows. Edward, businessman to the bone, wanted to buy a bigger spotlight and burn the lie to ash. I said we go quiet and honest. We checked everything, we documented properly, and then we asked Belle if she wanted to speak. Consent is a rule too. She said yes. She stood in front of microphones and said, I've lived in 10 homes in 4 years. I was called too much and too angry. And here somebody stayed, and you could feel people's opinions turn like a tide pulled by a different moon. Not because it was polished, because it was true. Let me ask you, quick gut check. Whose expertise do you trust more, the person with letters after their name who won't sit on the floor at 1:07 a.m., or the person with calloused knees and a lullaby in their mouth who keeps showing up? Do you think that's fair, the way we measure who's allowed to help? Tell me what you think. When the dust settled, the city asked to partner a university called about training students. The headlines softened. Someone mailed a note with 5 words. You saved my daughter, thank you. We opened a hall of resilience at the center, not a trophy case, but a truth room drawings with gold lines through the cracks, poems typed on wrinkled paper. The twins brought 2 small rocks painted gold and set them at my feet. "This one is brave," Ethan said. "This one stays," Eli whispered. "And if I tell you I didn't have to step outside and cry, I'd be lying." Edward kept learning. He braided badly. He read halting, then better. One night he slid an envelope across the table with my formal appointment as co-director and legal guardian if he couldn't be there. I hadn't asked. He had learned the difference between performing change and practicing it. Pattern interrupt. Then came an anonymous letter that said, "She's not who you think. Old wound, new salt." He asked if I'd ever had another name, and I hated how fast my body remembered the bedroom, his hand my leaving. I told him I used my mother's last name until 18, then chose my grandmother's, because a girl should get to decide which story she carries. He apologized again, and then pulled every background document he could find, so when the press asked, he could say the truth was boring. Sometimes the most radical thing you can be is boring on paper. Life didn't turn glossy. My mother showed up after years gone, denim jacket, cigarettes on her voice, apology in her eyes. We're trying slowly, Uno, and boundaries, short visits and long pauses. My father, ghost of broken things, came once to ask not for forgiveness, but grace. I told him I couldn't promise either on a schedule. Maybe you think I should have slammed the door. Maybe you think I should have set another place at the table. If it were you, what would you have done? We celebrated 1 year under the oak tree out back. Paper lanterns, lemonade staff, telling the kind of jokes only tired angels tell. Joseph shared outcomes about kids going to school, more blowing up, less trusting again. Angela announced we were opening a second site. The twins dragged me forward and handed me their little gold rocks like awards you can actually use. Edward asked me to marry him in a room that smelled like crayons and coffee, not flashy, not staged, a promise to keep tending. I said yes, but only if he understood perfect was a lie we weren't going to chase. He laughed and said he'd already retired perfect. Good. We still tape rules to the fridge, updated now: trust, kindness, bravery, presence. The boys added one: tell the truth even when your voice shakes, the same line I once wrote on a shelter whiteboard. Circles don't have to close to be complete. They can widen. So here's where I leave you, not with a fairy tale, with a question. Who gets to be called family in your book, the ones with the matching blood type, or the ones with the Tuesday night casserole, and the patience to sit on a hallway floor until the thunder moves on? We live in a world that hires credentials and forgets to ask who will hum at 1:07 a.m. We install cameras where we could install trust. We write policies that keep hands clean and hearts far away. Do you think that's fair? Tell me in the comments. Fight me a little if you need to, or back me up with your own story. Because if you were in that bedroom the night he walked in and saw me between 2 sleeping boys, what would you have done? If you were him, would you have come back to the shelter and apologized? Or would you have protected your pride until there was nothing left to protect? And if you were one of the twins, a kid waiting for someone to actually stay, what rule would you write on our refrigerator that the world needs to read? If this hits something tender, tap like so it reaches somebody who needs it. Subscribe. If you want more stories told, plain, and tell us where you're watching from. Who knows, someone right near you might be finding their person too. Drop your thoughts, your anger, your hope, your rule. Presence over perfection, brave and stays. You know what I mean.